Our next guest is the award-winning author of one of the most highly anticipated books of the fall. Pulitzer Prize winner Tracy K. Smith's new memoir, To Free the Captives, is an emotional look at the history of her family and racism in America. In the book, she writes in part, quote, "Am I imagining things? I may be. The imagination is the capacity by which we measure what is or what ought to be possible. Is peace possible? In a moment of ease? In a disastrous year? The imagination is an engine of creation. It supplies the terms of our longing, our wishes, appetites, and needs by perceiving what is missing and then exerting the creative effort required to fill that lack. What do I long for? What do I believe myself to lack? One thing driving me to this right is the desire to no longer be alone, the need to no longer simply call out, but to be answered back, no matter what the message might reveal. And not by the human chorus that is always on, everywhere, singing judgment, indignation, and fear. And the former poet laureate of the United States joins us now, and it is an honor to have you on. It's simply beautiful to read your words. It's a memoir and a reflection of where we are with race in America. And can you tell us the microcosm of your life that really tells that story?
Oh, sure. Well, one thing that this book invited me to do was to look backward toward the generations that I descend from. And so I begin by thinking about my father's family in Sunflower, Alabama, and his father's experience in World War I and returning to the South as a farmer, my uncle's experience in World War II, and also my dad's experience as a career Air Force airman. And some of the opportunities, certainly, that he encountered and that I benefited from as a child, but also some of the quiet struggles that he endured that I was never aware of until after his death, after I inherited many of his papers. And so I wanted to think a little bit about the quiet terms of belonging that we accept in America, the terms of our American imagination is how I think of it, and try and tease out a sense of what we mean to one another, what informs or inhibits us from meaning what we might or could mean, and then to think about what we might begin to do with one another to open up different kinds of possibility.
Were any of your perceptions, hopes, dreams, or your imagination changed by your experience of writing this all down?
Well, there's one thing that looking toward the archive and thinking about my own life that emerged for me. And it was a little bit chastening. I'm going to give it to you in sort of like bold terms, but I think what it actually is a quiet through line in our collective imagination. And it's that in this country, there are some who we perceive to be free, people who appear to descend from histories of power, of ownership or dominion over others. And the myth of this status is that it's something that is not inherited, but almost like inalienable from one's very person, when in fact it's the result of many acts and pacts, things like war, things like enslavement. And then there are others that we kind of default to the terminology or the notion that they are not free, but freed. And by that I mean they descend from histories of people who have been acted upon by the free. And so there's a different set of possibilities. There is also maybe a different ceiling on what can be expected or even challenged. I think these categories make us work harder no matter who we are. Either we're working to defend the status that we, claim on one of America's many hierarchies, or we're working to ascend, maybe leverage what we can against others. And I think it's an effort that could be expended elsewhere. I think there are things we could be building together as opposed to trying to keep one another in their place.
We're talking with Pulitzer Prize winner Tracy K. Smith about her new memoir, To Free the Captives. We're joined by Professor of History at Tulane, Walter Isaacson, and the host of Politics Nation, Reverend Al Sharpton. Walter, you have the next question.
You know, I'm a big fan, as you know, Tracy, of your memoir, Ordinary Light, and this seems to be a springboard from it. But this one has a very spiritual quality. You weave that in throughout history. And your last lines sort of echo Faulkner a little bit. I don't know if it's intentional, but it's where's the past? Is it up or is it ahead or is it behind us or is it within? To what extent were you talking about history in a spiritual sense that comes from your experiences?
Oh, I think it's inevitable. It's at least my experience of descending from blacks in the South, that history is intertwined with a sense of spiritual conviction. The vocabulary of the soul, the vocabulary that, you know, we are inalienable in that capacity, despite what, we're inviolable, rather, despite what, you know, neighbors or citizens might say to oppose that. And so I wanted to think, yes, our history is complicated, it's violent, but there are people who have managed to build great things, to support one another, to innovate different forms of belonging and community. And so thinking with my ancestors was a big part of this book, and the meditative practice that was described in that little excerpt from the book was really an attempt to kind of draw myself closer to that spirit presence, which I don't believe is gone. I actually believe that all of our ancestors are working still with us on this big project of liberation, which, as we know, is not yet finished.
Tracy, Walt and I are going to have a fight because I'm a bigger Tracy Smith fan than he is. So we'll deal with that after. But in reading your book and your work down through the years, I related because you talk about Sunflower, Alabama. My mother was from Dothan, Alabama. She's buried there. And you spent time at Medgar College in Brooklyn. So I feel like we kind of know each other. But what I want you to elaborate on, because I think it's important, this free versus freed really defines where people approach this conversation that you're advocating that we really have in this country. Because those of us that come from those that were freed just look at the world and the country different than those that were always free and their ancestors was free. Elaborate on that and why that was an important part of the book.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand what we're starting from. We have a lot of conversations in this country that are about like putting the past behind us and just building, you know, kind of like dealing with the present. But it's hard to get out of those viewpoints that we're born into in many ways, or that we're corralled into. But I think we can. I tell a story at the end of this book about visiting a small community in Kentucky and reading a number of my poems that are about Civil War soldiers' experience, Black Civil War soldiers. And after the reading, a white woman came up to me and said, "I'm so moved by these historical voices, and they remind me of something I need to go home and get for you." She went home, she came back, and she looked stricken. And I said, "What happened?" And she said, "Well, I wanted to get you this recording of my grandmother telling stories that she had been told as a child, singing songs that had been important to her growing up in Kentucky. But I want you to know my grandmother would never want to hurt you." And suddenly I realized, okay, this is, these are these old Kentucky songs, and they have framed me and my ancestors in a way that's going to be hurtful for me. But I think of that story with a kind of hope, because that woman came back. She also, I think in that time between the reading and returning, had begun to realize that some of what she had inherited might not any longer be useful. And maybe it's time to begin to frame a new view of who we are and who we are to one another. And that's what I'm hoping we can do by looking at these categories and then working our way out of them.
The new book is entitled To Free the Captives, a plea for the American soul. Tracy K. Smith, thank you so much for coming on the show and writing the book. We appreciate it. Thank you. We appreciate you.